Welcome to my channel where we cover the lore of video games. We cover all kinds from the mainstream to the indie, so I hope you enjoy your stay, and welcome to the Chronicler of Lore. Admiral Merlwyb has sent one of her people to Razad Han to get some help because a blasphemy has appeared out in La Noscea, and it's causing a few problems. She's gotten the Maelstrom together to deal with the thing, but she doesn't know all that much about it, which is why she could use your help. The Warrior of Light is not one to ignore a request for help, especially not from someone like the Admiral, so he immediately makes his way over to Limsa Lominsa. She knows you're busy, so she gets her people to fill you in right away. A few days ago, one of her men sent a report from Skull Valley about a creature that was way different from anything he'd seen before. He had no idea what the thing was, but the Sahagin made the connection between the weird creature and the monsters that started appearing during the final days. Since the Laminsans had been taking care of the Sahagins' temperate, they've been getting a better working relationship with the Beastmen. One of the groups of Sahagins said that they've seen quite a few of their people turn into monsters right in front of their eyes, and the biggest of these blasphemies is running around somewhere in the area. It hasn't been seen anywhere near the city, and the Admiral wants to keep it that way, so she wants the creature dealt with fast. Unfortunately, they haven't had much luck seeking the thing out, since they can't just send any old soldiers out after it, because they might end up turning into blasphemies too, which won't exactly solve the problem. That's why the Admiral decided to lead the investigation herself and only involve a handful of people, one of them obviously being you. Once the Warrior of Light lets her know that he's on board, the two of them head off to meet with the Sahagin to start the hunt for the blasphemy. The Beastmen are late to the meeting, which Merlwyb says isn't exactly like them, which means something bad probably happened. So the two of you head off into the spawning grounds just in time to see the people who were supposed to meet you being attacked by blasphemies. The two of you rescue the Sahagin, then head off somewhere safer to talk. Noel, the Sahagin that you were supposed to meet, is glad that you came when you did, since he would have been quite dead without you. But he does feel bad for the monsters that you killed, since they had been some of his people up until they randomly transformed. He had thought his people had been hit by some type of curse, but when no one could cure them, he realized that something else had happened. Once the Warrior of Light lets him know what blasphemies are and how anyone can turn into one of the things if they're feeling strong negative emotions, he realizes just how not good the situation actually is. So far, the only people in the area who've been affected are the Sahagin, and the Admiral wants to know why. Noel figures it has something to do with the crushing tide. They're a group of Sahagin that recently formed after their queen, the Indigo Matriarch, got very sick. It didn't take long for her to die from her illness. It was a sad moment, but since their old queen was against the tribe working with the Laminsans, her dying made more of the Sahagin decide to work with their former enemy. There are still quite a few who hate the Laminsans, which is understandable considering their history, and they join together to form the Crushing Tide, who plan on summoning Leviathan again to re-temper the Sahagin and stop them from working with the Laminsans. The good news is that they don't have enough crystals to do it yet, so they're starting to get desperate, which could be what led to the rise of blasphemies. Noel knows that the people he had seen turn had recently talked to the Crushing Tide members. Even though they disagree on how to move forward, that doesn't mean they plan on abandoning the members of the extremist group, not if they don't have to. The situation is delicate, since trying to convince them that their plan is stupid might make them turn, but doing nothing could cause everyone to have to deal with Leviathan again. At the moment, none of the Tide are tempered, so they can be talked down. And since the Warrior of Light did deal with Leviathan in the past, having him as a part of the team makes the situation a little less dangerous, and it gives everyone time to plan on how to move forward. It doesn't take long for the Sahagin and the Admiral to figure out what to do next. The two groups will work together and hunt for the blasphemy, and they'll fight it together when they see it. And they'll also set up a meeting with the Crushing Tide and try to convince them to stop with the whole primal summoning thing. That second part is probably a waste of time, but if you end up having to kill them all, at least you'll be able to say that you tried to talk it out first. Noel has already sent a message to Dao, the leader of the Crushing Tide, and he's agreed to at least talk to the Admiral. She's about to head to the meeting, but she wants you to tag along just in case things get all stabby, which is likely. Dao doesn't show up to the meeting spot, so the Warrior of Light and Merlwyb head into the spawning grounds to hunt him down. None of his people are all that happy to see your kind in the area, but they eventually point you in Dao's direction. The priest isn't exactly interested in peace talks, especially since his people don't really have a reason to trust the Laminsans, but he decides to come to an official meeting to negotiate. Since that turned out okay, the Admiral tells Noel to gather his people for the meeting. Dao and his people show up, but they're not exactly being friendly, so Myrtlewhip dives right into the conversation about the blasphemies and how they're a danger to both the Lamentsans and the Sahagin. Even though the two groups have had problems in the past, the Lamentsans have helped cure the Sahagin of tempering, which has proved that they are at least trying to work together with them. Since the Crushing Tide's goal is making sure that their people have a future, working with the Lamentsans to deal with the blasphemy is their best chance. At least it would be if Dao believed that the Lamentsans were telling the truth. The only non-Sahagin he trusts are the Serpent Reavers, and those are people who were tempered by Leviathan, and the only way he'll trust the rest is if they're all tempered. In other words, he'll work with them once they're his slaves. Noel thinks that's insane, but the fact that he's going against their god doesn't sit well with Dao or the Crushing Tide. Seeing one of their own side with the Lamentsans over their own people makes the two Sahagin with Dao turn into blasphemies. Dao doesn't think that's a bad thing. He actually thinks that their transformation is a gift from Leviathan. One of the new creatures heads off toward Elport, so Myrtlewhip goes after it while the Warrior of Light deals with the other one. Dao leaves and the crazy Sahagin thinks it'll be a good thing if all of his people turn into blasphemies, which means he definitely has to die before this all is over. But that'll have to wait until you deal with the new creature. After the Warrior of Light deals with his, he goes to check on the Admiral. She's taking care of hers too, but not before it killed one of the Sahagin. She feels bad about that, but Noel doesn't blame her. He's more worried about why Dao seems so happy that his people transformed. This goes way beyond tempering people, and if the Crushing Tide are trying to use blasphemies as weapons, then there's no chance of negotiating with them at all, which means you still have them and the much more powerful monster to deal with. Since the situation has the potential to end up far worse than the Admiral had thought, she decides to get the Maelstrom to hunt for the blasphemy out at sea to make the search go faster. But if it is a transformed Sahagin, it might be too deep in the ocean for her people to find, so Noel agrees to have his people search the deepest parts of the ocean for the creature, which means it's time to head back to the city so the Admiral can set things up. While she's getting everything organized, word comes in that some Sahagin attacked a Lamentsan ship. That ship was carrying a lot of crystals that the Kobolds had sent over. That means it's a good chance that they are about to try to summon Leviathan. So the Warrior of Light and the Admiral head off to meet Dao so they can come up with a plan to stop the Primal before it gets summoned. Even with the amount of crystals that they stole, Noel doesn't think they have enough to summon Leviathan, mainly because they haven't had him appear and try to flood the city yet. But they're close, which is bad for both the Lamentsans who don't want to get drowned and the Sahagin who don't want to get turned back into the Primal's pets. Unfortunately, Myrtlewhip can't afford to take people off of the blasphemy hunt to go after the Crushing Tide, since both threats are equally bad, but getting the three pirate groups or the Yellow Jackets involved will lead to the panic that she didn't want to hit the city, since that could cause her people to start transforming. So that leaves only one option, and that's getting the company of heroes back together. The group had handled primals quite a few times, which would make them more than a little useful, but they disbanded over 5 years ago, and there's no telling where their commander is. The Admiral doesn't know how willing they'll be to fight without their leader, but it's more than worth a shot, so she gives Wisecat a call to see if he'll gather the team while Noel and the other Sahagin keep searching for the blasphemy. While she wasn't expecting it to work, Myrtlewhip's call to the company of heroes actually caused them all minus their leader to show up. They are all people that the Warrior of Light has dealt with in some capacity or another, especially Brayflox, everyone's favorite goblin, and Wisecat, the big Roganin who's always out in Costa del Sol. Landonil, the overly violent and semi-insane Ellison, Uo Noon, and the alcohol expert Shamani Lamani all show up, and apparently none of their personalities have changed, even though they haven't been together in years. They came because the Admiral asked, but none of them expected her to be calling to reform the company of heroes. They want to know why, so she fills them in on the current situation. Wisecat thinks the situation is bad enough that their group would be needed, but since their commander's last order was to disband the group, he's not eager to go against it. Plus, without their leader, they're not really as good of a team as they used to be. Since they're looking for a capable leader to follow, Myrtlewhip nominates the Warrior of Light, since it goes without saying that he's more than capable. They all agree to follow the Warrior of Light, but they still wouldn't mind having their old commander around. Since he had gone his own way so they could make their own way in the world, none of them really think they'll ever see the man again. There's no real time to worry about finding him anyway. Myrtlewhip wants the company of heroes to split up and hunt for the blasphemy and stop the Crushing Tide from summoning the Primal. They all have different skills, so after learning what each one of them can do, the Warrior of Light sends them off to get started. While they're doing that, the Admiral checks with Noel to see if his people have found the Crushing Tide's hideout. She contacts them at a good time, because the Crushing Tide are attacking Candlekeep Quay. The Warrior of Light sends a few members of the company out to help drive the crushing tide off, and they manage to not only help clear out the attackers, but they capture a few of them alive. With a little bit of creative interrogation, mainly giving the Sahagin some very expensive liquor, they start telling you all everything. They had attacked the Quay because Dao said that taking it would give them a better position to attack the city. He doesn't have nearly the numbers he needs to attack the city, but he's confident that he can take it because he has the blasphemy. He's on an island to the south, and that's not only where the blasphemy is, but it's where he plans on summoning Leviathan. It's hard to believe that he's managed to control that monster, but if he did, things won't be easy to deal with, so you all head over to the island prepared for things to be very, very bad. And that's where we're going to stop for today. If you enjoyed this video, be sure to like, comment, share, and subscribe, and I'll see you all next time.